Hi, I'm Colton, the Puppeteer, and I've set out to crochet every single unique character in the original 14 L. Frank Baum Oz books. It's a mouthful. Quite the endeavor. The original 14, of course, start with The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, published in 1900 and written by Lyman Frank Baum, L. Frank Baum, and WW Denslow, his illustrator. This isn't the first time L. Frank Baum and WW Denslow actually worked together, but it is the last time that they worked together. And so John R Neill would be the illustrator for the next several Oz books. One of the reasons I chose this project was because I love a collection. I have patterns, for the Flintstones and for the Jetsons and for Scooby-Doo and the gang. So small collections, great. I knew from the very beginning of crochet that I was going to crochet, of course, the core four from my favorite movie as a child, The Wizard of Oz. And then if you do Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, Lion, then you're going to have to do, obviously, Glinda the Good Witch and the Wicked Witch of the West. And I was like, but of course you have the Patchwork Girl and Captain Bill and Trot and Ojo the Lucky. You have all of these other characters who are actually fun and whimsical and neat in appearance. And wouldn't it be great to bring those characters to life as well? And I was like, you can't bring some and not others. So why not just do it all? Do every single who has a line of dialogue and affects the plot in some way, moves the plot forward in some way. I found that was a nice rubric. So we said every unique character who has a line of dialogue and affects the plot going forward. Those are the qualifications to be crocheted in this project, starting with The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It's been really great because I've got to go back and actually reread to make sure, who has a line of dialogue and advances the plot forward. All right, I started the project in January and I finished in May. I crocheted the dolls that I'm about to show you in that period of time. It's been a wonderful trip down memory lane. It's been a really great chance to hone skills, find incredible patterns, and learn how to repurpose things and build things for myself. A handful of these are unique patterns that I created to respond to the brief to create the character, but many others are repurposed patterns that I got just for this project. Oh, that looks like a munchkin, or oh, that will work. And so I'm really excited just to bring you in, show you what I've done so far, and bring you on board the world of Oz. It's really fantastic. Though I do have, the next Middle-earth property queued up or in a watch list on my television, it really is cool to have something that is unique, rich with lore and world building that generally is untapped by popular culture. So a lot of fun. I'm really excited to dive in and bring you to L. Frank Baum's original World of Oz. Wizard of Oz, this is my personal 100th anniversary edition. My grandfather bought this for me in November 17th of 2001. So I started reading Oz when I was 9 years old, when I learned that there was a book to go with my very favorite movie. And not only was there one book, but L. Frank Baum wrote 13 other Oz books that came after. And then somebody else came along and wrote even more. But I was so fascinated with an author from 1900, a century before. I was so fascinated with the idea of an author from 1900 having a series of books. I was really into Goosebumps. I was really into Animorphs. So thinking that even 100 years ago, there were readers like me who were into really cool fantasy series, and a fantasy series that wasn't elves, it wasn't dwarves, it was weird stuff. I'm going to crochet the weird, nitty-gritty, wild and wonderful world of Oz creatures that L. Frank Baum has created. Wonderful Wizard of Oz doesn't get too far outside of the box, though. So, of course, begins on the farm with Uncle Henry and Auntie Em. Now, these character designs are actually based on an illustration done by John Neill from Book 6, The Emerald City of Oz. I had a lot of fun. So one of my very first things I designed were Auntie Em's slippers. So her slippers, I crocheted those all on my own. So Auntie Em, Uncle Henry were the first two. I knew if I could get through the less visually appealing and less exciting, they're not monsters, they're not fantasy creatures, it's not bright colors. I knew if I could get through the less exciting characters that crocheting this would be a breeze, but just do them in the order that they appear, because there are always going to be those kind of less fun ones. And it started, fortunately, with Uncle Henry and Annie M. Next up, of course, we have Dorothy and Toto. Yeah, I really loved crocheting these. I saved Dorothy for last. Actually, she was the last one created of the original 4. And yes, these silver slippers are removable. I'm going to take for granted that you know. One of my least favorite things about the internet is the "did you know" about common information. So most people at this point know that there were no ruby slippers. So ruby slippers were invented for the 1939 film because they were doing it in Technicolor, and ruby slippers rather than silver slippers popped better on screen at the time, and they absolutely do. So when Dorothy arrives in Oz, I gave her, just for this, a little red shoe. In future books, she is blonde. So John R Neill illustrates her as blonde, often with a large red bow in her hair. I went with a modest, conservatively sized bow for her blonde hair. I get, yeah, a little wink and a nod to some red, to our ruby slippers. But yes, we have Dorothy, we have Toto. It's a really great time. Dorothy and Toto, fun time. When Dorothy arrives, she meets the Good Witch of the North, and the Good Witch of the North is unnamed temporarily. So the Good Witch of the North she's older. She's described as wearing all white, which L. Frank Baum in his world building chose white as sort of the magical color. So she wore white, and she was the Good Witch of the North, which in Oz land, that North country is the Gillikin country, and everything there is purple. You're going to, I'm going to take for granted that you know. So North in Gillikin country is purple. To remind you, Munchkin country in the east is blue, Winky country in the west is yellow, and Quadling country in the south is red. And so when I'm designing this character, I went based on the illustrations provided. This is one I uniquely designed myself. Based on the illustrations. This yarn is, you'll get a closer look at it, but this yarn is actually a very rubbery sort of wire type yarn that I used. It was just the perfect color. It was perfect for, you'll find that I choose yarn often based on color or effect rather than feel or ease of use. But anyway, this is the first doll that I uniquely designed for this project in particular, based on illustrations and just facts about the world. Gillikin country is purple. She's the Witch of the North who displaced Mombi, who we will see next book. She doesn't officially have a name in the novel. However, in the 1902 musical extravaganza, we're going to look into this. In the 1902 musical extravaganza, L. Frank Baum himself named her Locusta. Locusta, she is here. Dorothy actually stays in the house. She stays overnight in her home that has been carried by a cyclone in the land of Oz. And she puts on her blue gingham dress and the silver shoes the next morning. She stops and has dinner with a lovely Munchkin family. Bach is of course referenced in the musical Wicked as well. And I'm Bach. Bach is here. So yeah, she eats with a wealthy Munchkin and his family. Munchkins wear all blue. We tie her there. And so we like that. Next is when Dorothy actually meets the Scarecrow. As she continues on her journey, she takes a rest on top of a fence post, and Scarecrow here winks at her. And then they proceed forward pretty much how the movie dictates. Dorothy actually does say, "There's no place like home." L. Frank Baum wrote the line, "There is no place like home," and it's in chapter 4 of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. That was a fun little, like, oh my gosh. Next up, the Tin Man and his origins. I love it. I love the Tin Man. The Tin Man was always sort of my favorite as a kid growing up, so I was excited, of course, to make this one. The movie, of course, is glosses over the official origins of the Tin Man. Nick Chopper, the Tin Woodsman, a witch. He fell in love with a young servant of a witch she cursed his axe to where he chopped off pieces of his own body, and as he chopped them off of himself, he would replace them with tin, and then he would be back to doing work, and then he would make a pass at the young lady, and then the witch would cause his axe to slip again, and he would chop off another foot, and so replace that one with tin, until eventually his whole body was tin. And you know, it's a magical world. You're just gonna have it's a magical world. We're talking about a tin man, how he became tin. You're gonna have to let some things slide. But anyway, so he basically chops and replaces his body piece by piece into tin. And yeah, there's more to come on that story later. So yeah, that's fun. Book 10. Now the lion, it was really fun. He's often illustrated again in future books as having a big red bow. I put his little tail back here. It's a very cute, small design. I really enjoyed how wee it was. All right, next up are where the surprises start to come in. What's that, Joe? This is a Kaleida, because they collide into you. Anyway, this is a Kaleida. That's how I pronounce it. You can argue the pronunciation. Great, you win. Kaleida is what I'm going to say until somebody who knows better tells me better. But yeah, so these two beasts are forest creatures in the land of Oz. As they escape the Kaleidas, the Scarecrow tells the Tin Woodsman to chop this tree down, and they use the log to cross the bridge. And then the lion roars, and that scares the Kaleidas enough for just a moment for them to knock the bridge down, and then the Kaleidas are on the bridge and they fall are dashed against the rocks below. So it's more of an action sequence for a 1900 children's fantasy novel. Stripes on the arms, just Frankensteining pieces of other dolls together, really was kind of the way of making a Kaleida. There will probably be a redemption of the Kaleida, but I was so eager to get past it. And then, though I love the color of yarn that I chose, the texture of yarn was absolutely awful, and so it was very difficult to work with. So I didn't want to work with it anymore. So I made one and considered the design done, and we're good, because the Kaleidas didn't speak. They did change the trajectory of the story. There were two of them, so I compromised by making one, since it didn't. Next up is the hardest. One of the hardest makes, one of the most frustrating makes of my crochet journey so far. Like from my very first project, it made me too far. The stork. So, ask me about the stork. What's the stork, Colton? Well, the stork. The stork is a stork. I have love storks. Nothing against storks. To connect with this piece more. In order to connect with this piece more, you see I'm holding it by the neck. In order to connect with this piece more, I even looked up the significance of storks, and I found in indigenous American culture, storks were representative of rebirth and life. That's how we get storks bringing babies. That's how we get that legend, is they were known. Their migratory patterns sort of coincided with spring and the change of seasons and the onslaught of babies just in nature. And so storks then became associated with bringing babies. There's a river. Again, our characters have crossed a river, the Kaleidas fell. The Scarecrow gets caught in said river. And a stork, hanging out as a water bird would by the river, sees our friend the Scarecrow in distress, and then goes and picks up our friend the Scarecrow and carries him to safety. You do wonderful things. This Lucky the Stork pattern, great pattern. I searched and searched for an adequate stork pattern that fit the vibe and the brief as best that I could. There is a maker called Starbird Creations that was in the process of creating a stork that is hyper realistic. It was released after I finished my requisite stork. If I ever go back and have need to do a stork, I'm using Starbird Creations stork. This was lovely. This is exactly what I wanted. The stork is the least imaginative thing in the land of Oz that I've found so far, is all I'm saying. When I set out to do this project, I did not think I was going to do a stork. It took me longer than it needed to, just because I didn't appreciate the experience as much. Anyway, that's the stork story. They then continue their journey down the yellow brick road, and they end up in the field of poppies. There is one who is used to navigating the poppy fields, and that's the queen of the field mice and her loyal subjects. The queen of the field mice, this was a really fun pattern, a really neat leaf pattern, and gave her a little royal cape with a leaf. Field mice help move the lion and Dorothy out of the poppy field and back on track to the land of Oz. And then later in the story, when they're getting back to the Emerald City after having dispatched the Wicked Witch of the West, she's helped then too. The Guardian at the Gates. Based on the illustration, somewhat on the illustration. I took some liberties. There was a lot of Edwardian, Shakespearean sort of dress. And so to avoid everyone looking the same, I really did sort of take liberties with some costumes and use references or use pieces of this, that, and the other to mix and match, and then put everything in appropriate colors. The Guardian at the Gates, of course, is wearing only green. The spectacles are provided at the gate to make the Emerald City look green in the original book. The Emerald City is green in all subsequent editions of The Wizard of Oz. It is belabored and made very clear in this original first work, that the green of the Emerald City is an illusion brought to you by the spectacles. Everybody wearing green spectacles makes everything look green, and that's part of the humbug of the wizard. However, that is retconned in the most, like, they just did it. They just said the Emerald City's always been emeralds. What do you mean there's no war embossing, say, hun? Like, so Emerald City originally was not emeralds. It was a normal city that everybody's wearing green goggles. After this, the Emerald City is always emeralds. It always has been. Guardian of the Gates. Guardian of the Gates never has a name. Guardian of the Gates does show up several other times in many other Oz books. They are a character in the world of Oz. I made this shirt. This is when I started making everybody's heads turn. Mobility. Now I'm free to see the world, they said. I don't feel the need to redo the Guardian of the Gates. I'm actually very proud. A couple of these, the original 4, as we revisit them or as we see them again in future novels, I'll probably redo them and have a unique design to them rather than using a reference pattern. So I'm excited about that challenge. But the Guardian of the Gates, I don't know. I'm pretty proud of this one. I don't know why. He just works all the way around. Introduces us then to the soldier with the green whiskers, the private, as he's otherwise called. The soldier with the green whiskers, referenced frequently, referenced in Wicked, has been referenced in other Oz works, never given a name, and again, appears in future Oz books. But soldier with the green whiskers, I was really excited. I repurposed like a nutcracker design for the body part. I had so much fun making this little beard. So much fun, in fact, that I have an original character that I'm going to give an extraordinarily long beard to. And they are the ones who escort Dorothy and her crew, of course, to see the wonderful Wizard of Oz. And that first meeting, when the wizard tasks them with killing the Wicked Witch, the wizard appears as something different for each of them. This was a quandary for me, because do I do the illusions of the wizard? He appears as a giant ball of fire, the giant head first for Dorothy, then he appears as a beautiful fairy queen for the Tin Woodsman, and then he appears as a giant ball of fire, I think. So he appears as several things. They're not the wizard, so they're illusions of the wizard. So I didn't crochet those. The Wicked Witch, of course, she knows that they're coming for her. She sends out the flying monkeys. This was really fun to do. I've always envisioned one of the flying monkeys, like as like a macaque, like a Japanese snow monkey. So I wanted to do that. I thought that would be so cool to have a little vest and a little fur. So this isn't. So what would have been smarter to do? Hear me out. What would have been smarter to do is to get plush yarn that looks like this and crochet with it. Like get the plush, get the furry, get the eyelash yarn. That's gonna give you this effect. crochet with it. And then I took this yarn and I knotted it. I went every other square, every other stitch, where you can see a stitch here. So I went every other stitch and knotted it through and frayed it, because I couldn't find the plush yarn with the little rainbow sparkles in it that would have this actual effect. I really love how it turned out. It took so long. It took so long, but it was so awesome. And of course, this was partially for me, partially to see if I could, and I totally did, and it was a good time. So King of the Flying Monkeys, and then we can't just have the king. You know what? There's gonna be a flying monkey for each of our heroes here. A flying monkey for each of our heroes. Nice. I had some fun making some flying monkeys. The flying monkeys take them back to see the Wicked Witch. I was really excited to get to this. And part of the reason that I ended up choosing to do the entire collection of Oz is because, well, there's the film Wicked Witch that everybody knows and loves. There's Elphaba, of course, that Elphaba's built from. And then there's the original, who she actually is, the one-eyed, teeny tiny short. She has little spats. She has little spats on here. She has her hair in pigtails with this really ridiculous variegated yarn that's perfect for the occasion. It really was a fun time all the way around to get this done. And again, with her one eye, with a fun patch, it was fun to sew down. A non-Oz fan would not likely recognize this as the Wicked Witch of the West, but this, according to the illustration by WW Denslow, and the only person to get to illustrate her, because, as we know, the Wicked Witch of the West melts away and dies. Scarecrow and the Tin Man in the winged monkeys, the flying monkeys, actually damaged them heavily, which, again, as we see in the film. So we have the Winky Tinsmiths. After the witch is melted, Dorothy and the Lion go to the tinsmiths, because that's Winkies in the West country of Oz turn out to be expert tinsmiths. And so Dorothy and the Lion take what remains of the Tin Woodsman to the local Winky tinsmiths and have him repaired. It's 4 identical looking bald gentlemen in aprons, not terribly imaginative or fun. And so what I elected to do then was to use the Ada Lovelace pattern by Mofu Crochet. Use the Ada Lovelace pattern. Ada Lovelace was the original computer programmer, so somebody who tinkered and worked quite a bit. And then I found an incredible Willy Wonka and Oompa Loompa pattern by Furi Amigurumi. I used the Oompa Loompa for the other Winky Tinsmith. Only gave 2 instead of 4. The Winky Tinsmiths, they have the golden cap worn by the Wicked Witch of the West. Oz fans will recognize this. This is the actual, an actual illustration or version of the golden cap. I did some French knots in purple to sort of look like jewels around a crown pattern. This was a really fun make. I spun it up on my own. There's a pin in it because it actually goes on other characters, but it lives on the King of the Flying Monkeys. So the golden cap is what the Wicked Witch used to command the flying monkeys. The wearer of the golden cap could command the flying monkeys 3 times. And so our characters, once the Wicked Witch is dispatched, they use it. On the final time, Dorothy does give it to the King of the Flying Monkeys and allow him to control himself. We get next, though, in this next chapter, the origin of the golden cap that is so useful. And as it turns out, there was a powerful sorceress from the North Country, the Gillikin Country, which is purple. And so her name is Gaylette. There are no illustrations, really, of Gaylette. Well, there are. Again, they're very Edwardian, like this really obnoxious. And I was like, you know, I'm going to have a little fun and just reimagine that character a bit. So I used a couple of patterns, gave her a high collar. I added some appliques to a skirt. She was in love with a gentleman named Kilala. Again, he was sort of self-made, but one day Kilala was actually carried by flying monkeys and dropped into a river. They were playing a prank and they decided to, hey, we're gonna pick up this guy in his pink vest and his fancy coat, and we're going to drop him into the river. His wife, or betrothed, was so upset that as a wedding present to him, she crafted the golden cap because she was a powerful sorceress. And she said, you know what? Anyone who wears the golden cap controls the flying monkeys. Well, she was so upset by the sight of the flying monkeys that when Kilala put on the cap, he said, you know what? You just go where the princess can never see you again. And so that was their directive. Eventually, we don't know how, but the golden cap ended up in the possession of the Wicked Witch of the West, where the flying monkeys served their bidding and did their final third wish for her whenever they recovered Dorothy and her friends. So we get back to the Emerald City. The Wizard of Oz. Oz is speechless to realize that they've killed the Wicked Witch of the West, his only competition. This, of course, is when we discover that Oz is the humbug, that he is not capable. This, too, is when they use the line, Dorothy goes, "You're a very bad man." He goes, "Oh no, I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard." That line is in the book. Seeing that again, I'm like, oh, that they really borrowed heavily, it is based on the book. Wizard does the balloon thing, it doesn't work. Toto then chases off after a cat. The audience, whole thing, well documented in film. But who can help us? Glinda. She's the good witch of the South. Quadling country, the red country of Oz. And she lives at the very edge of the deadly desert that surrounds Oz itself from the rest of the world. They go on a journey to get the person who can help them, Glinda. And that is when they meet the fighting trees. Based on a really awesome tree beard pattern. The designer is down in the description below the video. Really a lot of fun making this. It was 2 birds, 1 stone. Yes, of course I want to make a tree beard. Yeah, I need to make a fighting tree. Okay, got it. Well received. Love making this. They get past the fighting trees and then they make it to the dainty China country. This was really fun because I really wanted to experiment with micro crochet, but I wasn't brave enough yet to try. So I did go down to a smaller weight of yarn and a smaller hook size and tried it as close as I could. So in the dainty China country, we meet a milkmaid, a joka, and a little princess. In the dainty China country, they are very scared about being broken by our heroes. Eyes are clumsy, leave so you don't injure anybody. So they're kind of shushed on and moved along. But they speak, they advance the plot ever so slightly, and we just show you. Here's the little milkmaid next to Dorothy. So I did sort of make them like kind of to scale. We have our dainty China country. We didn't make the giant spider that the lion killed that had no lines and didn't really... Lion's the king of the beasts because he killed this king of the spiders who wasn't enough of a character to even have a line. So, next, I'm kind of proud of this because I made it all by myself. So, this one's really cool because Oz fans know the hammerheads. Flat-headed little guys here. Hammerheads with big ties. No arms. No arms. Those are just little suspenders. And then look here. Boing. Yeah, so this was a fun experiment. It is a challenge once it's out to get it back in. But yeah, it was really fun, like crafting this, trying to design it, make it work. Once it's out, it's hard to sort of stuff it back in. I'll find a way though. This was a fun make just to sort of see if I could. And it was also another incentive to make all the fun, weird characters of Oz because there's lots of weird, anatomically non-traditional characters of Oz. And the hammerheads are just the first of many. It was a fun experiment. Excited to try the next ones up. All right, so after they meet the hammerheads, that's the last of their main obstacles until they get to the palace. They stay overnight in the Quadling country, and then they arrive at the palace where a small guard, right, he's like a little marching band girl pattern, who then takes them in to meet Glinda. So Glinda is one of those characters that exists not only in the original Oz book illustrated by WW Denslow, in which she's described as having blue eyes, auburn hair, and like rubies in her crown, and wearing a white dress. Again, Quadling country is red, so she wore rubies as her jewelry, but her dress, since she's magical and in L. Frank Baum's world, at least in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, this first book, good magical characters wear white. We have this illustration by WW Denslow, we have future illustrations by John Neill, and then we have the 1939 film, where Billie Burke is auburn-haired. Her dress is this beautiful, very, very light pink, could be white, but it's very obviously pink dress. And then, of course, we have their modern interpretation alongside Wicked with Ariana Grande with a blonde, pink dress, really avant-garde, beautiful work. I wanted something that was recognizable as Glinda from anyone who is introduced to Oz at all. You should know from any one of those sources that this is probably Glinda. That was my goal with this character design, and I think I landed it. I really, really wanted to get the ruffles, that Fibonacci spiral of ruffles that the Ariana Grande skirt has. I played and played and played and made these little appliques that I sewed to a base of the skirt. I think there was a lot of sewing involved, a lot of experimentation. This was really a lot of fun to make using some of my favorite yarn. There won't be a redemption round for this one. I really am pleased with how she turned out. She's seen a lot of love. I really am proud of this one. But yeah, this was the finale. I was saving the best for last. Super, super, super fun make. And that's all of the dolls from The Wonderful Wizard of Oz from the very first book. It was quite the load. The stork was a challenge. The stork was the biggest challenge of the lot. I really enjoyed my teeny tiny taste of micro crochet with my Dainty China Country people. And yes, I got to find so many other awesome pattern designers. This was a great project, and this was part 1 of 14. So after doing all of these, I stepped away doing a palette cleanse. At the end of this, I created from the beginning, from the completion of my very first doll to Glinda. I created 86 dolls. But thank you so much for sticking around. And that is book 1, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. That's the conclusion. Every character that spoke and moved the plot forward in crochet form. So thank you so much for sticking with me on the first leg of the project. Book 2 is coming soon. In the interim, I'm working on some fun projects that I found out in the wild across the internet that I've been eager to try while I work on things like the stork. Don't talk about it. Anyway, love the stork pattern. Thank you so much to the designer of Lucky the Stork, #LuckyTheStork. Not the pattern, it's just my brain. But anyway, loved this journey. And yeah, look forward to more weird, fun stuff. And I'll cover the next books as we go forward. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.